It's 5 o'clock here in Eugene, Oregon, and we are back again talking Oregon Ducks football on the Voice of College Football Network. My name is John Evans, joined by my co-host Owen Murray as always. Oh, and a big win for the Ducks this weekend. A lot we're gonna have to get into. How are you feeling after another big weekend for Oregon?
I think everybody in Eugene is feeling fantastic, John. I don't think you could be feeling much better at this point in the season. I don't think there's anything you've seen from these Ducks so far that makes you feel bad. And certainly a 69-3 win is going to make you feel even better.
Absolutely. Big win for Oregon, number or up to the number 4 team in the country now in the latest AP rankings after the absolute demolishing of Oklahoma State. Oh, and we talked about after that game just kind of our instant takeaways, but as you've had a bit of a chance to sit with it the last couple of days, how are you feeling now about it and in terms of the reactions that you've seen from people around the country? And it feels like Oregon has really come on in terms of that national perception because of, they did what they did to Montana State, but that's Montana State and FCS team. We'll see where this Oklahoma State team ends up. It was a tough year last year for them. It looks like it could be another tough year for them this season under Mike Gundy. But to do that to Oklahoma State, that certainly got the attention of people around the country. It felt like.
Yeah, I mean, I think the word you go to immediately is just comprehensive. When I go back and I'm looking at pieces, I'm writing and I'm editing, and I'm going through just seeing all these stats and what they're saying, and I'm just, man, like there was not a facet of this game they did not control. And that there was nothing in this game that Dan Lanning and Dante Moore and Taj Lupoy and Will Stein did not decide that they wanted it to happen. And I think, that's something that's great for this team, because there's going to be stuff you can't control, but you want to control as much as you possibly can in a football game, and they certainly look like they're able to do that.
Absolutely. Owen, as we get into a little bit of what we're going to do today, we're going to go over some news coming around the program, a bit of how the roster is shaking out, some injury updates and stuff like that after week 2. Then we'll get into our takeaways from that game. We did this last week, went over 2 exclamation points, things we were excited to see from that game last week, and then 1 question mark we still have going forward. Talk about a little bit of what's going on after week 1 of the NFL season, with some big games there, and then we'll break down this upcoming matchup against Northwestern this weekend, get into that a little bit, and then talk about what needs to happen for these Ducks over the next couple of weeks before this Penn State game. Owen, you got anything to say before you get started here?
Now let's get into it.
All right, so starting things off, a little bit of some updates around the program in terms of the injuries. We saw Theron Johnson was a guy who has been expected to make an impact for the team this season, transfer cornerback from Northwestern, from Northwestern too, and the team that Oregon is going to be playing this weekend actually. But a guy who's at Northwestern, but still has started at cornerback and done so pretty well in the Big Ten for the last 2 seasons. He was a guy that was listed as questionable this week after being out as a bit of a surprise in week 1. Saw him out there warming up with a brace on, but he didn't actually get on the field for any of the snaps during the game, any of the snaps even during 11-on-11 in the warm-ups. So it seems like although Dan said during the media last week that Theron would be back, it seems like they're just kind of being a little hesitant with him, making sure he was doing some pregame warm-up stuff, almost like he was questionable before that first game. So it seems like they're just being cautious with him right now. Don't want to put him in any situation where anything could happen that would re-injure things or make things worse after he does work his way back. But it seems like he's a bit of a question mark. It'll be interesting to see if he does get on the field when he goes to face his former team in Northwestern this weekend. And then the other big one to come out of this weekend was Austin Novosad. Seems to have some sort of injury going on right now. Didn't see him when Dante Moore went out of that game. The Ducks went to Luke Moga as their main backup quarterback. But I was watching him up from the media box the entire time during warm-ups because he was a bit of a guy that was a surprise when he showed up on the injury report as questionable for this week. So we were watching him during pregame warm-ups. I didn't see him throw a single pass the whole time. So he was catching a lot of balls for people and kind of warming up like he would, but I didn't see him actually throw a pass. So there seems to be something going on there. Oh, and with those first 2 that we kind of came out from this weekend, is there anything that stands out to you from that?
Yeah, I mean, the Novosad one's obviously a surprise because these are the games where he really gets a chance to prove himself, not only to these Ducks, but also potentially if after this season it looks like he's not going to get a starting spot to really put some stuff on tape and go elsewhere, because he doesn't have a lot of college film for coaches to look at. And obviously he's got great guys who can be in his corner. A lot of guys respect Will Stein, but it's tough for him to not get snaps in this game to really put some stuff on tape. Theron Johnson's interesting because really the question is now, like, does he get a starting spot? Because guys like Iffy and Brandon Finney have been so strong early on here that, and they're so comfortable. We'll talk about that a little bit later. That I'm curious if they want to shake up this secondary. That was already, it's all a lot of change coming into the season. If they want to make another change, they believe they're is good enough. For now, I think the secondary is certainly stable. Without him, I'd be curious to see if he can raise that ceiling.
Yeah, the secondary looks incredibly fast right now. It's living up to the potential that a lot of people thought it could have in terms of just the athletes that the Ducks have brought in that secondary. A lot of guys with a lot of length, a lot of speed. These were guys in Naeem Offer and Brandon Finney that were, highly rated recruits. Same thing with Ife Obadegwu as well. So we'll be interested to see how Theron kind of works his way back into that rotation when you have had so much success early on. Some other things to come out. We saw Dante Moore, Kenyon Sadiq, Alex Harkey all get dinged up a little bit in that game, but they returned. Dante said after the game, when asked about it, that he's doing good. Kind of had someone fall on him in a red zone situation. He says, these things kind of happen. But other good news to come out: Emmanuel Pregnon was back after he got rolled up in that first game. Seemed to have like a bit of a wrap on his knee in the pre-game warm-ups and stuff, but he started out there at left guard, was Oregon's highest graded player, pass blocking by PFF. No pressures from him. Really good work overall. So good to see him back. And then other ones around the program, we saw Dylan Williams and Braden Platt get downgraded to out for that game. Those are two young guys in that linebacker room who would be kind of some depth options and guys we would have seen play the last couple of weeks had they not been limited. We'll see when we get them back out on the field at some point. And then Kavika Rogers, still not out there. He was the first option off the bench at guard in week 1 when Emmanuel Pregnon went down, but he's dealing with an ankle thing right now. Still going to be he's listed as out, probably going to be out or questionable for this weekend. And then Dylan Gresham, the other guy we there's a lot of excitement around him after he had a really good spring game, broke off a big play on a slant pass, but we've seen him in a neck brace on the sidelines, so it seems like he's going to be out for a while. We'll see if we see him back at all this season, but another guy who is a lot of people are excited about in this program, a lot of attention around him and Jeremiah McClellan, his redshirt freshman, kind of heading into this season. So
yeah, I mean, it's a tough one, but honestly, like in terms of where the Ducks are, we've been talking about and praising how deep this team is, and these aren't ones that really affect that depth in major ways. The Ducks really still feel strong as a 2-deep roster, and like they'll be able to compete just like we expect them.
Absolutely.
Killer. Well, no, we're gonna hit the John Evans segment now. It's a staple. We're gonna go into our exclamation points and question marks here. From week 2, like we said, we did a full pregame or postgame recap, about an hour. If you want to check that out on our channel. But we're just going to get, a little bit removed from the game here on Monday. How we're feeling about this one. John, we'll let you take this one away.
Yeah, for me, the first thing that excited me from that game on Saturday against Oklahoma State was Will Stein dialing up those deep shots for Dante Moore in the offense. We saw Dante look really comfortable in that first game, taking his reads. He threw a lot of underneath passes, hit a couple over the middle, in some intermediate situations. But from the get-go in that game, they obviously hit the big play to Noah Whittington early on the run, and then they get it back a minute later, and he dials up a shot play to DeCorian Moore on a double move, and Dante hits it. Gets out of the pocket, hits it, gets his feet set, hits it on the money. Just a beautiful pass. And same to the one to Malik Benson. 2 for 3 for him on those 20-yard passes. He missed Jeremiah McClellan on one in the end zone as well. But the ball to DeCorian Moore and the ball to Malik Benson especially. I mean, that one was Ducks were at the 42, so he dropped back to about the 50-yard line when he threw it, and it was 50 yards and not even like air under it necessarily. It was a bit of a laser beam, and
I feel like this zip on his pass. This is really
exactly. There's some real zip on that pass that had me excited about. You could see it opening up in that hole in the middle as the safeties kind of split. I could see it from up where I was up in the press box, and I was like, oh, Malik Benson is breaking open right now. And then it was just instant. Dante hit the back of that drop back and laser beam to him for a touchdown. So I was really excited to see that. And those were. He only threw a few of those passes deep, so I was excited by the way he was able to still operate the offense as it's supposed to and hit those underneath passes for a lot of those yards after catch, which is what Oregon's offense has always been predicated around under Will Stein and even under Kenny Dillingham going back. But when he did, Dan Lanning said they had some of those dialed up, that the looks weren't there in that first game to Montana State, and then once it got to a certain point, they weren't necessarily looking for those looks. So it was exciting to see that flash against Oklahoma State. They weren't doing it as much late in the game, but in that first half when they were trying to break the scoreboard, it was exciting to see a couple of those flashes, that deep passing game, and how exciting this offense could potentially be with Dante Moore's arm back there.
Yeah, I'm just fine. I mean, you talk about great arms, and we had a chance to see some of them in the NFL too. The Justin Herbert, I thought his performance against the Chargers showed that off. I mean, you saw Josh Allen play last night, and he's just superhuman. You look at those arms and you see the zip. And just when we talk about guys that are able to really fire a ball, and beat guys over the top and layer throws and like throws that would not get there if you just put a little bit more air under him. And you see that from Dante. We're not saying that he's going to be that kind of quarterback, for sure. But that's just something that, some guys like Dylan Gabriel didn't maybe have that.
Yeah, it feels like there's just a basis of an upper level of arm talent that Dante Moore has, where he does just, it kind of unlocks things that not all quarterbacks can do. And I talked to Blake Benson about that a media day over the summer, and he said for sure that he could feel that out there as a receiver, that these were throws that not every other quarterback, he might have felt like he was covered before on throws he was getting hit by on Dante, because Dante could just fit it into some of those windows. So what do you have for your first exclamation point thing that excited you from this past weekend, Owen?
I'm fired up about the downfield blocking. That like feels like a highlight of this offense, honestly. These guys get really excited, like talking about it. It's become something that they clip out on the broadcast and will show you. When the Ducks are up 40 points, they're like, "Hey, we need to pull something. Let's show the block. We don't need to show the Decorian Moore touchdown again. Let's look at Kenyon Sadiq wrecking a guy downfield. Let's look at Jeremiah McClellan land a block on someone." And I love how excited these guys get about it, because this was a really underrated receiver room. Coming into the season, we didn't take it in our position draft because we didn't feel like there was the proven quality there. But these guys have really made up for it, not only with their play on the field in these first two games, but just with how invested they've been in making this offense work. I'm really excited about that, and I'm excited to see how it turns out when they get into Big Ten play, when they get into a more physical style of game.
Yeah, I think that just speaks to the program that Dan Lanning has been building here in Eugene, and what, the buy-in that he has from his players and the investment that he has from them, where they want to work hard and work hard off the ball like that. So exciting to see that, and I'm really impressed by what Ross Douglas has done in a short time since coming into this staff as the receivers coach.
And everybody in the program is speaking highly of him. Like, you hear from Dan, you hear from these receivers just about the kind of guy he is, and it's always a risk you take. But it seems like Dan Lanning, as part of being a great coach here and building a great program, is really talented at hiring guys, just understanding who they are off the field and getting guys to connect with them. Because we've seen it happen with Rashad Samples when he came in. It seems like the running back room was immediately talking about this guy and being like, "Hey, we really buy in with him." And part of that's, what they want to have coming out of the program. They want you to think that he's a great coach because they chose to hire him. But it really does seem like there's a talent there in Dan Lanning's locker to hire guys who are not only great coaches, but great guys and who can get people to connect with them.
Yeah, those people skills are so much more important, I think, in college football than even the other levels of football, like the NFL, just because you do have to maintain so many relationships in terms of what recruiting is and the turnover that you have on coaching staffs. And so I think his ability to not only make really good hires, and he's been a really good judge of character with that throughout his tenure at his short tenure at Oregon so far, but to also be able to, like we said previously, retain guys like Will Stein for now his third season on as an offensive coordinator. Tosh Lupoy, not necessarily as hot of a name potentially in the head coaching market as a guy like Will Stein, but just a really, really strong defensive coordinator for this team. Chris Hampton, another guy who's been on the staff with Lanning for a couple of years now. It really speaks to the judge of character that Lanning is, and how consistently he's able to, find guys who are willing to buy into what his program is. And he has found that time and time again throughout the coaching staff, and then, with the players he brings in.
Absolutely. Where are you going next with this?
All right, next thing that excited me, it was just how the overall, front to back dominance that this defense had. Yeah. It was at every level. The defensive line was creating penetration, and stuffing the run. The linebackers were flying around. Jerry Mixon had a phenomenal game. Devin Jackson had a really good game. And then the secondary, they continue to be. I felt it was suffocating, just the way if Oklahoma State must have felt trying to pass the ball throughout that game, between Zane Flores being in the pocket and just suffocating as it collapsed around him from the strength of this Oregon defensive line, and some of those blitzes that they would bring on the creative stuff that Lupoy likes to draw up. And then the secondary just so quick to the ball to react when they would hit a short completion, and then Dylan Thiedeman's there making a big hit to stop him for a short gain or negative yards even, and then guys getting in there to hit receivers as they're trying to catch passes across the middle in those short yard situations for breakups. Just really impressed by every level of the defense. I'd like to read out what Oklahoma State did throughout this game. Their offensive drive track is 3 and out, 3 and out. And they make one first down, then punt again. Then they get a field goal. Their only points of the game, which was a fluke coverage bust, where there was some confusion in the secondary between Naeem Offord and Ifeoma Badegu, and they get one guy gets wide open. That's their only points of the game. They get a chunk play from that, and then eventually hit a field goal from the yardage that they gained. But then it's another 3 and out, 3 and out, end of half, 3 and out, 3 and out, 3 and out, 2 pick sixes in a row, 3 and out. They get one first down and then punt, and then the end of the game. So just front to back, Oregon's defense was absolutely dominant throughout this game. One of the best, overall performances I think I've ever seen from any level of college football. So very excited by that. So definitely, very excited by what this defense can do, and excited to see what they do when they do face those top tier offensive teams later this season. So, and I'm what do you got next up on something that you're excited about?
I'm gonna hang with the offense here. I'm just saying Montana State wasn't a fluke because this running back room is just supremely deep. We were talking about, hey, why do we think Mekhi Hughes isn't playing this time last week? And we're like, hey, just how talented is this running back room? Where they're just trying to find a way to really get some of this talent in the game that they feel like isn't going to get reps later in the season. But I think this game proves it, just how unbelievably deep this room is, because you see so many guys. Again, 7 guys get reps in this game. Mekhi Hughes is one of the very last, and he doesn't look bad, but the amount of variance and skill in this room, the guys who are power guys, the guys who are speed guys, just makes me excited, because it tells me that if this team gets into a situation where they need a guy to go outside zone and really just beat, they're going to say, hey, I need you to beat this nickel to the outside. I need you to get out there. They have guys who can do that. They have a guy who can bust it in, go right up the middle on 3rd and goal. That fires me up, because I feel like in the past, you've seen guys, this room have a guy like Bucky who's really strong and fantastic, but behind him you have some question marks. You have Noah Whittington, who was maybe injured at the time. You have a guy like Jaden Lamar who's great, but he's unproven. These guys have all had a chance to prove themselves, and they look fantastic.
This running back room is just so deep, it seems, at that point. And like you said, the versatility of the guys in different roles, being able to put De'Aaron Hill kind of out as a receiver a little bit, use him on those jet motions to get his speed just out in space, bringing Jordan Davison in. And I've been really impressed by Jaden Lamar. I think he's a guy who doesn't get enough attention. He has his development year over year seems to just be incredible right now. He looks really explosive, really fast on the run plays. And he's a guy that they have out there a lot right now. He's been the running back 2 early this season, because they do trust him to pass protect. They trust him to be an extra blocker out there when they need him to, and then be able to be a check down option for Dante Moore in the pass game. So really impressed by the running back group, and it's top to bottom depth overall.
Awesome. Well, let's hit your question mark here.
All right, the thing I still have a question mark about, and it's not necessarily a bad thing that there is a question mark about this, is what does the offense look like when it is challenged and it is behind the sticks and not operating to the level it has throughout these first couple games here, where we've seen them consistently be able to pick up big yards on 1st and 2nd down to create easy conversions and easily move the ball down the field, be able to hit those huge explosive plays for some of those big touchdowns. But what does this offense look like when they have to get off the script a little bit, when it's not Will Stein scripted these first 15-20 plays and we're going to march right down the field, when it is later in the game and it's 3rd and 8 and Dante Moore does have to just drop back, read out the defense and make a decision and pass the football. We haven't had to see it yet, which is a good thing, because the offense has just been churning right now. But what does that look like going forward? Because it will certainly be challenged in a couple of weeks when they head to Penn State. So. Yeah,
I mean, I think that's the biggest question mark with this team. I'm going to go to the other side of the ball, but to touch on yours too, I think that's really going to be, we talk a lot about the maturity that some of these guys, we're saying, do they have it? And I think that's going to be the biggest thing that proves it, because we feel like they have it here. We feel like they've shown that they can operate under pressure, the limited amount that we've seen. We've seen that they can operate in a 2-minute drill and a 4-minute drill. But we just haven't seen them really challenged it. We haven't seen them say, hey, you're not in a spot you want to be in. You have to go problem solve and you're off script. I'm excited to see that. And I believe they'll succeed because of what we've seen already.
Yeah, it's just gonna be a we'll have to see situation. I don't know. We'll get into a little bit later what we want to see over these next 2 weeks before they do head to Penn State. But the level of competition really is just not there early in this season. It is a nice little runway to kind of figure things out and experiment throughout the early parts of the season. But it's going to be interesting to see what that happens when they do really get tested when they go on the road. So, gonna be interesting to see how that plays out.
I'm gonna hit you with one more. My question mark here is just how this defense that has been so successful at home, so successful when it can keep the play in front of it, is gonna do when it goes on the road, and then also when there's a team when it plays a team that has an offensive line that can stymie this pass rush just a little bit, so that this secondary has to respect the deep shot, because so far in these two games, really, it's been able to keep everything in front of it. You're limiting people to check downs and quick throws. And they're, of course they do respect the deep shot, but there hasn't been a threat and there hasn't been a need to really, drop off and play quarters and leave guys deep and really expose yourself underneath and let those linebackers go to work. I want to see what happens when you have a number one receiver who can, ask some questions of this secondary. I want to see what happens when there's a guy in the slot because we saw Taco Dowler be really great in that Montana State from the slot. I want to see what happens when there's a team where he's not the only option. I think it could ask some questions of the defense that we haven't seen answered yet.
Certainly, there's tons of talent in this secondary. We've seen that be evident on the field over the first couple weeks of the season, but they had, like you said, they really haven't been tested. I'd have to look up the numbers, but I barely think Montana State threw the ball downfield at all, or Oklahoma State, except for that one coverage bust. So, yeah, we just haven't seen a team that has the talent on the offensive line to force the secondary to have to, like you said, have to cover for that long to be able to get those deep shots, or teams that have receivers that can really test. And that's what I think this team does excel at. I was surprised that Oklahoma State did get down to the red zone and they tried to just throw like some fade balls up there. That I was like, that's what these corners are going to be good at, because they're guys who are
huge,
like,
bro.
They're
all you can't do against Oregon.
Exactly. That's what they've done is really well in terms of building this roster. Those corners are all really long because they saw what happened against Jeremiah Smith in Ohio State in that Rose Bowl last year. So they got a bunch of long corners on this roster. So I was really surprised to see not trying to the thing with young corners like that, you'd think you'd want to try to confuse them down the red zone instead of just challenging them one-on-one, which is exactly what they're going to excel at. So definitely excited to see how this secondary shakes out, because it is just such a, the physical talent that a lot of these guys have is really exciting to see out there on the football field.
All right, we're going to take you really quickly through here what we saw from some Ducks in week 1 of the NFL. Because, there were some Ducks who thrived. We'll talk about some guys who maybe are still figuring it out. Justin Herbert, though, on Friday night, went down to Brazil, balled out, beat the Chiefs, reigning AFC champs 27-21. He looked fantastic in this game. We talked about it. But I look back at him. I think this is just one of the best arms in the league. He hits 318 yards and 3 touchdowns. He's really developed as a scrambler. I think it was a 19-yard run to win the game. He slides down and is just fired up. He's the guy who makes the Chargers a real contender. And I'm so curious because this Greg Roman is a run guy, but listen, bro, they're trusting Justin Herbert with the ball in this game. I'm excited.
Yeah, I've not been excited that Greg Roman is the coordinator for Justin Herbert over the last 2 seasons. Last year did not necessarily thrill me with their passing game, but I was surprised when I went back and looked at that. Justin Herbert had 24 touchdowns and 3 interceptions last year. He was super efficient in an offense where he wasn't really asked to do that much, and we saw him earlier in his career throw for 5,000 yards and almost 40 touchdowns when he was asked to open up the offense a little bit more early on in his career. I was excited to see the fact that I've been a Justin Herbert's a top 5 quarterbacks. I've been saying this for years, and despite people's doubts, the ridiculous conversation of him and Tua, I think he has been over the last couple of years firmly in that group, right behind those the Josh Allens and Lamar Jackson and Patrick Mahomes type guys. I think he's a lot closer to Joe Burrow than Tua Tagovailoa is to Justin Herbert, and I was very glad to see that put on display in front of everybody on Friday night. So. He just those, like you said, some of those throws, and it reminds me of what Dante Moore did, where it's those laser beam throws.
Yep.
That
exactly.
Justin Herbert would have been a guy that hit that throw that Dante Moore hit to Malik Benson. It's the same thing from him on Friday night in Brazil. Some of those throws, not every quarterback can do that. And he's a guy with that special type of arm talent.
That's why we're excited about Dante Moore. Just a little bit more around the league. Bo Nix and Troy Franklin teamed up a little bit. Bo didn't look great in this game. He was one of the best rookie quarterbacks in the league last year, but he goes 25-40, 176 yards, touchdown, a couple weird picks, and a fumble. 4.4 yards per attempt is not great. But I'm excited because Troy Franklin, we didn't really see a huge role for him in this Denver offense last year, but it seems like he has a role in that slot now. 4 receptions for 44 yards on 6 targets. He really seems like he's going to be a part of this team.
Yeah, really excited to see that for Troy Franklin, a guy who didn't really play the slot at all in college, but seems to have found a bit of a role doing that for the Broncos early this season. Was only trailing Cortland Sutton in terms of those, the targets and the snaps and stuff like that. So good to see that, and obviously we know the connections there with Bo. Hope Bo can get things figured out a little bit, because this was exactly what I feared for him going into year 2, that he is a bit of a quarterback that can be easier to solve at times and figure out when you do. It's a thing that a lot of quarterbacks struggle with in year 2, and a lot of players in general. It's just that the league has never seen you before in year 1. They get a chance to spend all offseason watching film on you and getting ready for that second season. So we'll see what how things go with Bo Nix. I still have a lot of I didn't have a lot of faith in him going into the draft. I was very pleasantly surprised by how last year turned out. So I will. It's definitely gonna be something I'm watching going forward. And then we look to the other pair of Oregon teammates that we've got in the league right now. Tez Johnson and Bucky Irving beat the Atlanta Falcons for their Tampa Bay Buccaneers 23-20. Bucky had a really nice touchdown reception where he kind of got the swing route, dove, hit the barely enough of the pylon to get in there, and then Tez got a little bit of playing time. So I'm excited to see too that he made the 53-man roster, and despite some of this talent that Tampa Bay does have in their receiving room with future Hall of Famer Mike Evans and a first-round pick and Mekhi Buka, that Tez is still able to find his way onto the field a little bit early here.
Yeah, and then I was excited about Evan Williams, who really has found a starting spot next to Xavier McKinney in that Green Bay offense, who beat the Lions. That's not an easy team to beat. He got the pick in that game right before halftime, sealed it for those guys. Wasn't necessarily that the guy we felt like was going to be a starter coming out of Oregon in that draft class that was so talented, but he really does seem like he's one of the guys who's really secured a starting spot most out of any of them.
Yeah, I remember he had a really strong pro day for Oregon, and I felt that really helped him move up draft boards. That was one of the first things I got to go to covering some of the Oregon football stuff. So it was exciting to see him there, and then really take on that starting role with the Packers last year, and has been a really consistent safety for them. It's been exciting to see for a guy who we didn't really know what we were going to get when he transferred in to Oregon from Fresno State a couple seasons ago. So.
Awesome. Well, we're going to head to a break right here. When we come back, we're going to look at this Northwestern game, get you all of that. We got some great stats to pull for you. We'll see you in just about a minute.
College football is even more exciting when you've got some action on the line, and the games are even better when you're cashing in. And the Voice of College Football is the place to be to get the greatest value. Start with my picks. 75% against the money line, 58% against the spread, and I've got a 40-plus year track record. 11-0 in the college football playoff for me last year against the money line, 8-3 against the spread. And I'm just the warm-up act. Steve Merrill of Wager Talk is our ace in the hole, show stopper. 7 years with the Voice of College Football, over 30 years in the industry. Steve gives us analysis on all the big games, but you can't miss Steve's weekly under-the-radar pick. 28-12 against the spread the last 3 years. You also get picks from some of our top analysts here at the Voice of College Football, including Corey Bratta, Matt Zemek, and Steve Dace. Check out those numbers. Become a YouTube or Patreon member for just $99 per month. Go to the main channel on YouTube, click join, and then select the betting tier. Do the same thing on Patreon. Make 2025 a winner now.
All right, well, I'm fired up because I just checked the score and the Bears punched it in. From
nice.
The goal line. I'm excited here, but we're going to take a look at this Oregon Northwestern game halfway home here on Oregon Live at the Voice of College Football. John, how much more of a test is this Northwestern team than what Oregon's already faced? Because it really feels like, it is a Big Ten team. It's a Power 4 team, and they're, setting up that advancement, but it really still does not feel like this should be a challenge for these Ducks.
Yeah, Northwestern is a program that has found success at times here and there throughout the last, 2 decades or so, but typically sits near the bottom of the Big Ten and looks to probably find themselves around there going forward this season. They don't have a very talented roster. It's similar situation to a school like Purdue, where they just don't really bring in those 4- and 5-star prospects, and a team like Oregon does year after year. The line is similar to where it was for those first couple of games for Oregon, nearly 30 points. So I don't know if we'll expect quite the same Oregon trying to like run up the score like they did to Oklahoma State. It felt a little personal there. We heard Dante Moore's comments about Dan Lanning being like his dad, and Mike Gundy saying those things, feeling like it's tackling a family member. So they tried to run things up a little bit on Oklahoma State. I don't know if they'll do that to Northwestern necessarily, but it'll be good to get the experience of going on the road, I think. But I don't know about how much on the field is going to test this Oregon team.
Yeah, I mean, you look at this team. Preston Stone threw 4 picks against Tulane. We can just take you through. They lost 23-3, headed down to the Big Easy. At Tulane, that wasn't a great game for them. They came home 142-7 over Western Illinois, but that doesn't, particularly feel like it proves anything for this team that really just, like you said, lacks the talent to really fight with the team like Oregon. I was curious because I'm pulling some stats from them. They're a very, very pass-heavy team. Part of that's because they're playing from behind so often. But 41% is close to what we saw from the Seahawks last year with Ryan Grubb. I said I wanted to see the secondary tested more. Does that feel like something that will, really challenge these guys on the back end, or is it just going to be like short passes and stuff that will just more challenge the linebackers?
Yeah, I think it's going to be more of a challenge to the linebackers and to rallying to tackle and stuff like that than anything over the top. We saw Preston Stone be pretty solid in that game against Western Illinois, 245, 3 touchdowns for him in that one. But again, you're playing Western Illinois, team that Illinois beat by an even worse score in week 1. So, you haven't really seen much from Preston Stone. He's a guy that can make some rash decisions at time, like we saw at Tulane. I think Oregon could end up taking advantage of him in a similar way they did to Zane Flores in this game. He's a more experienced guy than Flores, and he'll be at home instead of on the road. But I think Oregon just has superior talent, on the defensive front to go get after him with the pass rush, and then the receivers just are not as talented as Oregon's cornerbacks and their safeties and stuff like that. So I think Oregon should comfortably be able to turn this in a game where Northwestern is trying to pass because they kind of have to in a way that Oklahoma State did, but they really can't get anything going, and will lead to a lot of 3-and-out and quick possessions getting back to the Oregon offense.
Yeah, I mean, the big benefit of this one for the Ducks is that they get to go on the road. And they get to go on the road before they go to State College. This is, it's important to note that this is not Northwestern's traditional stadium. They're playing on the lake here, in their converted soccer stadium. It's about 12,000 seats for them. But, we still want to see more in the defense and everybody really performing those quick change, high pressure situations. Not that that's going to happen, but this is not going to be a crowd like Autzen where they're behind these guys. They're going to quiet down, and they're feeling, it's 12,000 people, but it's still going to be a tough spot. Now, I'm excited to see how they sit there where, how important is the fact that they get on the road before they have to go to Penn State?
I think just the test of being on the road and not having those comforts of home are where that test really lies, more in terms of than the environment you're going to be going into, like it would be like it is going to be in Penn State. Chicago's not going all the way to the East Coast, but it's it's a 4-hour flight from Eugene. It's real Big Ten territory out in the Midwest. So I think that is still a legitimate road trip. Everybody's going to have to get on the plane and figure out, how those routines go with the travel. So, and then playing at 9 a.m. is going to be interesting too. 9 a.m. local time here in Eugene. It'll be an 11 a.m. like big noon kickoff out in Chicago. So, I think just the experience of getting to operate your walkthroughs and all the game prep in a week where you're not going to be at home the whole time, I think is what's going to be most valuable to them. So we'll see how these things go, because it's literally about 1/10 of the amount of people as you're going to see up in the stands when they go to Penn State.
It's kind of crazy to think about. I want to drill down a little bit here on the secondary when we preview this. Northwestern, like we said, 60% almost of those plays across these first 2 weeks have been passing plays. And the Ducks went a little bit more to cover 2 in that, or not the Oregon State game, the Oklahoma State game. Is that something you think they'll see again in this game? Is that how you confront this and sit with those guys high? Or, are you, we talked about how the linebackers are going to operate in this one. Do you go back to what the Ducks really feel comfortable with?
I think it just depends on how this game kind of plays out early on. We'll see. I have to dive into more of Northwestern's film later this week to get into how much they are going to try to attack downfield, because Oklahoma State was a team that certainly wanted to do that, and we're looking to find the shots down the sideline. So Oregon ended up lining up with a lot of 2 high safety looks, even went to some 3 safety looks where Kingston Lopa or Dylan Thieneman would kind of, in a similar way to what Oregon saw from Ohio State last year in the Rose Bowl, where Caleb Downs was lurking in the middle in a Tampa 2, where it's more of a less of a cover 2 and almost a cover 3. Normally you have like a middle linebacker who has to get very far back to for that middle third responsibility. And instead they're using a guy like Thieneman or Kingston Lopa in that kind of over about 10 yards or so off the center over in the middle of the field. We'll see how those things work out at Northwestern. It's a team that will want to throw the ball, but I don't know how much that's going to be downfield. So it's going to be a lot more like I said, rallying to the ball and being able to make those tackles. Oklahoma State wanted to test Oregon vertically. You saw some of those shots early on, and then Dylan Thieneman, able to get to the sideline and break those up. And once the momentum kind of got to Oregon's side, and those kind of really shut down. But like you said, going to be interesting to see how this plays out throughout the secondary when you do have a team that does like to pass the ball as frequently as Northwestern does.
Yeah, and that spot next to Thieneman was kind of one of the biggest question marks coming into the season. We had guys who we felt like were going to be comfortable there. We're 2 weeks in. Where do we stand with? Because Kingston Lopa was a guy who was really in there. He came down and really hit a guy on one play from the middle of that, and that was what really stood out to me. Where do we stand with Lopa and Flowers and all these guys who really could fit into that spot next to Dylan?
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how this continues to play out, but it seems like Flowers is that guy next to Thieneman. He started both of those games, played the majority of the snaps. They're moving Thieneman around a lot, which I think is interesting to see. He was a guy that when he was at Purdue succeeded really, really well as a single high safety or as a 2 high safety, being able to range over the top. And we saw that closing speed to break up one of those early passes from Oklahoma State, but they were moving him a lot more into the slot, into the box, more as a traditional strong safety throughout that Oklahoma State game, even more so than they did in week 1 against Montana State. And then Flowers has been the primary guy over the top, as a more traditional roaming free safety. But we'll see how this works out. Lopa's been in kind of a specialized role. He's over the top the least out of all of Oregon's safeties right now. He's either in the slot, in the box. They want his size to be able to impact things closer to the line of scrimmage, and we've seen it make an impact. And he's been used in those specialized kind of roles before. Where last year in the Big Ten championship game, they used him specifically because he is 6'5" and because he brings size that not most safeties do. So they used him to cover Tyler Warren in that game. I think we'll continue to see him using that specialized role, and then Woodyard seems like the true backup to Thieneman right now as the strong safety. His snap counts look pretty similar to Thieneman in terms of his usage between different areas of the field. And obviously we saw him being in, not necessarily making a play because the kind of pass went right to him, but being in the right spot. That when pressure was in Zane Flores' face, he just threw it right to Peyton Woodyard, and he was able to pick 6 that one. So.
Yeah, well, let's go a little bit now because to be so honest, this Northwestern game is not something we expect to be a test, but there is a test coming down the road, and we've alluded to it. And it's when the Ducks go on the road for the second time this season. They head to Penn State here in I think about 3 weeks, 2 weeks, 3 weeks. We're going to break down a little bit
because there's a bye in there.
Yeah, 2 games.
Or no, now
it's the end of this month here.
Yes, it is the end of this month. It's 3 weeks. I think there's a bye right after, actually, now that I think
that's correct. Yeah, there you are. Because Penn State goes on by the week before. We're going to talk a little about here a little bit broader. What do we want to see before these Ducks head to Penn State? We've got a thing each for offense and for defense. Just based on what we've seen here, I'm going to let John get into it here. John, what do we need to see from this offense before they go over to Pennsylvania?
Yeah, I want to just continue to see them be able to build those sustained drives. I thought the end of the first half of the Montana State game, where it was a 2-minute drill, Dante executed it really well. Hit a lot of short passes towards the sideline, was able to move the ball down the field pretty quickly. And then the end of that first half against Oklahoma State, 4-minute drill, different situation where you want to move the ball down and score before the end of the half, but you want to, you got double the amount of time, so you're trying to take that time down, run the ball. Passes underneath, and he was able to operate that really efficiently for a 12 play, 76-yard touchdown drive. So I was excited to see those ones, and that's what I want to be able to see is Oregon didn't really have to do it against Oklahoma State because second play of the game, we've seen those counter runs be able to break for some big explosives for Oregon through in the past and early this season specifically, but that wasn't the plan for Noah Bennington to go 60 yards. So we didn't really get to see some of those opportunities when you're two of the first 3 plays of games go for 60-yard touchdowns. So you don't get to see that, but I would like to see them continue to be able to do that in these coming weeks. Show that they can have those drives where you are moving the ball down the field methodically, and you're not just relying on some of those big plays to happen and get lucky. That's what Oregon's offense is based on. I think we will continue to see that. And then still mixing in those explosive threats, being able to every once in a while, when the look is right, when you get Malik Benson going on something deep, you get Dante or you get DeCorian Moore open on a double move, and you can hit those passes because you do have the quarterback to do that. So excited about where this offense is headed, but want to just continue to see basically what we've seen through the first couple of weeks continue to happen.
Yeah, I mean, we just want to see it get closer to what we expect the Wilstein offense to be.
Yeah.
I just don't know that it's going to happen because we've talked about how we don't expect Northwestern to be a threat, and then the only game remaining is an Oregon State team that's losing to Fresno State, and you get them back at Autzen Stadium. You wonder. I mean, they're not going to slow themselves down to do this, but if they just want to really see it be more methodical, and say, hey, let's just look for these, and that kind of gets into what I want to go. I want to look a little bit more varied. John built a beautiful graphic for me. They spent about 60% of these first 2 games in 11, but I was fired up when I saw the very first play of the Oklahoma State game go to Jamari Johnson. It was a pass and it was a catch, and then Noah Whittington takes it 60 yards for the house, like you said. So who knows? Maybe there were 5 more passes to Jamari Johnson, but I just want to see them really continue to build out this repertoire, because I think, especially with how deep they are at tight end, at running back, I want to see what they can do with an expanded personnel package. I want to see what happens when they spend more time in 12 or 22. And I think this could really be beneficial, because you've seen Jamari Johnson mostly as a blocking guy, but this is where you challenge guys, because we've said Oregon has superior depth to almost every other team in college football, and that's where you win. That's where you say, hey, I believe that your second nickel can't cover Jamari Johnson. I believe that you're not going to be able to handle it when we have Jaden Lamar and Noah Whittington in the backfield, or De'Aaron Hill and Noah Whittington. You feel what I'm getting at here?
Absolutely. We saw more varied personnel usage in that first game. There was about a 50% 11 personnel usage, and then that went up to 67 or so for the second game. But I should go back and go into my little spreadsheets that I have and divide this up by like the first half where like Dante Moore was really playing, because I think it would be a lot higher, and they get more creative. And then you look at the second half, and I have like every single play, and it's 11, 11, 11. They're just sitting in 11 personnel throughout the second half when they're not really trying to test anything throughout the game. But I've been really excited about the creativity of the looks that you're giving some guys, giving Kenyon Sadiq a snap at quarterback, almost a Tyler Warren type way, and like letting him run an RPO. Not that's something that should be a key staple of your offense, but it shows just your creativity and the trust you have in a guy like Sadiq out there, putting De'Aaron Hill out at receiver, putting DeCorian Moore in the backfield. They Cooper Perry in the backfield for a snap. They get creative with the way they like to use different guys, and I'm excited to see that continue, because when you can get, that's what this offense is predicated on, is getting those playmakers out in space, and the more different ways you can do that, the more different options you have and stuff like that out there. So, and it makes it hard for those teams to know what you're going to do when you can come out in a 12 personnel look, but Kenyon Sadiq is really playing as like the X receiver or something like that, because he can do that in a way that most teams' tight ends can't. Exactly.
It's just the advantage that this team is going to have. These are games where the Ducks have an advantage just based on pure talent. And their ones are going to be better than your ones, and their twos are going to be better than your twos. When they get into games like Penn State, when they get into games like Washington, USC, in the college football playoff, you're looking for spots where our twos are better than your ones, our threes are better than your twos. And this feels like a spot where the Ducks really can exploit that. I'm excited to see. I want to see them develop it here, because it's going to be useful down the road.
Certainly, it's going to be interesting to watch how this rotation does shake down these next couple of weeks, because I think you are going to find Oregon in situations similarly to what it has been, where they're up big or early, and you can get a lot of rotation, especially going on in the second half. But I think it's going to be interesting to watch these first half rotations over the next couple of weeks and how that does shake down, because I don't think you're going to be using 5 cornerbacks consistently when you're at Penn State, or be using 7 receivers like when you're at Penn State. No. You're going to cut those down and put your best players on the field as much as you can, because you're going against the best of the best. Even though you do want that depth to be able to give guys rest and stuff, at the end of the day you want DeCorian Moore out there, because anytime the ball's in his hands, he can be a difference maker.
Absolutely. Let's flip the side of the ball here. What do you got on defense?
I just like to see a little bit more from the pass rush at this point. It's been solid throughout the first couple of weeks of the season. But when I was looking at some stuff, not necessarily that this is everything, but it's on PFF, it's like the lowest. They like break down like different sections of, the coverage, the run defense. The pass rush has been the lowest for Oregon. It's still like, a top 40 unit in the country overall, but it's really been driven by Mateo Younglele early on this season. He's by far leading the team in pressures. He's got 6. The next closest is a tie between a couple of guys with 2. You have guys who you think can make havoc in the backfield like Amari Washington, but you just want to see it a little bit more consistently, because if he can be a guy that disrupts the with pressure from the interior the way a guy like Derek Harmon did for this team last year, it really disrupts teams' game plans, because I mean, interior pressure in general, it can break an offense, because you flush the quarterback out all of a sudden, then they're running into those guys like Tatum and Mateo on the outside. So I talked to Tatum Tuioti after the game about his development as a pass rusher. He says, just the explosiveness and working on his strength and his body is something that he does in the offseason very consistently. We've seen him put on weight every season, put on muscle every season. Just continue to see more consistency there from him in terms of his pass rush and his ability to, win in those one-on-one situations. With his bull rush has been really strong, but can he dip and rip around the outside corner to be able to kind of finish some of those rushes and close it on the quarterback with more pressure? This defensive line has been fantastic against the run. Amari Washington's been a beast against the run. Tatum Tuioti has always been a very strong run defender off the edge. But can those guys generate a little bit more consistent pressure when you do face teams like Penn State and Drew Aller, where can you put guys in Drew Aller's face and make him make a mistake out there at quarterback? Because if Drew Aller's back to the whole time with a clean pocket, he's going to eventually, he's got a big enough arm, he's going to hit you for some shots that are going to take the top off the defense.
Yep, I feel you, and I was curious because we saw Amari Washington get double teamed a little bit more in this game. I'd look up and be like, oh, yep, there's 2 guys on him. And so I'm curious to see what opportunities that opens up for a guy like Tatum or a guy like Barry Alexander next to him. Because once you get a guy who really starts becoming like a black hole for these guys, and you get the offensive lineman coming into him, and maybe he's not going to beat all of them, but certainly somebody else is. That's what gets me really excited, because I think there are guys who have the quality to win one-on-one in this team. And as soon as you have one guy who gets double teamed, it's going to be great everywhere else.
Absolutely. It just the more good guys you have on the defensive line, it just adds on top of each other. That's why that depth is so important throughout that group, because you're going to have guys coming off the bench who are fresh, like Aiden Breland, for those pass rush downs. And if they can create pressure, it helps out everybody else. It helps Mateo be able to get pressure, forces things to Amari. Amari be able to get pressure, forces things out to Tatum. Everybody's got to work together, kind of create it on that defensive line. And it can't all just be on Mateo Younglele's shoulders to be able to create pressure off the edge every time, because it is hard to do. It's not something you can do consistently on every single down. You got to be able to create that across the board from your D lineman. And the Ducks do a really good job with their like sim pressures and their blitzes and stuff like that. Tosh Lupo is a very creative defensive coordinator in terms of that stuff. So they do get a lot of those pressures, not necessarily from their defensive line, from those blitzing guys off the edge, from bringing the linebackers in like Bryce Betcher, Devin Jackson on those simulated pressures and stuff like that. So, but to be able to you need guys to be able to win in one-on-one situations. So,
I mean, 100%. I've got a little bit of a similar feeling. I want to see this communication on the back end just take that next step, because like really the only explosive plays, we talked about the one in the Oklahoma State game, some of the stuff that happened with Taco Dowler in the Montana State game just happened because it seemed like some guys were on different pages, and that happens because they're young players. And it's something we expect. I want to see them use these next couple games to really, really develop their relationships on the back end, especially because we've seen kind of this unit get solidified. There was a lot of rotation in these first few games. Just as you chop and change and see who's going to be great in real game action, it feels like they've got an idea of who that is now. I want to see these guys really become a unit. I want to see, them handle some of this passing that a guy like Preston Stone maybe is able to do, even if he's going to throw picks, but he's going to try. And I want to see how they handle that together. I want to see if they can maybe limit the stuff that has been the very the little stuff that Oregon has struggled with, and the few times they've given up explosives in these first couple blowout wins.
Yeah, communication is so important for the secondary, and it becomes increasingly important in modern college football, where everyone's spread out on offense. You have all these checks and motions and shifts going on at the beginning of the play. So it's always super important to be able to communicate on that back end. I think that's where having a guy like Dylan Thieneman has been huge for this team so far. Peyton Woodyard talked about it. Aaron Flowers talked about it when I asked him about communication and stuff, and how important Thieneman has been for that group, getting everybody set up. And you can see it too when you're watching the games. If you're watching him on the backside at safety, you can see that he's talking to everybody out there. He's telling whoever the nickel is to move over when they start shifting and motioning and all that stuff. So, and I think the relationship there is really solid with that back end. The fact that you have those three guys, Lopa, Flowers, and Woodyard, who came in together as safeties, they have a really strong relationship together, and it plays onto the field because they communicate well, and they've been doing it for a year plus in practice together.
Yep. Just really quickly, we had somebody pop in here asking about Theron Johnson and Dylan Gresham. We did a full injury update at the start of this episode if you want to hop back there. But Theron, we expect him to maybe be back for this Northwestern game. It's a big one for him because he transferred, obviously, from Chicago to come to the Ducks before this season. Dylan Gresham, we don't think is going to be back for a while. We've seen him in a neck brace on the sideline. Dan said he's not able to go quite yet. That's a tough one, but it feels like the Ducks, we talked about Jeremiah McClellan. Maybe this is a chance to just give him a little bit of his flowers. Has been really, really impressive these first couple of weeks. Gresham's a tough loss, but it feels like the Ducks have the receiver room now to make up for it.
Yeah, I've been really excited by what Jeremiah McClellan has done over these first couple weeks of the season, and I've been impressed too. But you talked about the way that everybody has kind of given that effort out there blocking and on that second level from those skill position guys. But Jeremiah McClellan is a guy I've seen used when I've been watching stuff in a similar way to some of what Justice Lowe was doing last year, where they would trust him to be the sift blocker on split zone and run some of those plays for him because they know he'll go thump when he's put in motion and used to block somebody. And then they were able to. They ran like a split zone play, had McClellan coming as the sift blocker, and then a couple plays later they gave the same look, motioned him across, motioned him back, and then faked the handoff, and then he's wide open and it was able to pick up a bunch of yards after the catch a couple of times. So impressed by what I've seen from him so far. He really kind of has, it seems like, taken that second outside receiver spot. It's a rotation between him and Malik Benson, but the two of them bring different things. He's been more of that possession guy, and then Benson can take the top off the defense with the speed. So Theron Johnson, I'm interested to see how that works out this week. I'm sure people will have questions for Dan about what's been going on with him, because we have seen him warming up like he's going to play last couple of games and then not be out there on the field when the game time comes. He's got some sort of knee issue right now. He had a wrap and stuff going before that first game when we knew he wasn't going to play, and then when he was questionable this week, there was a brace on it with like a sleeve, it looked like. So he's moving around a little bit, but doesn't quite seem like he's like a full participant right now. I think they, like Dan said, they just want to get him more practice reps before he really does get out there. But I think this would be the spot to do that because he is, going to his old school. It's a team you're not as worried about. You don't want him to be making his debut in the secondary, and just in terms of when you're at Penn State, because you want him to have had time, out there playing with the guys who are going to be out there in that Penn State game. You want those guys to feel comfortable communicating with each other on the back end when you do get in those situations.
100%. And like we mentioned too, we feel like this secondary is in a spot where it's really confident that, Theron Johnson might add some stuff, but he's only going to be a ceiling register. The floor on this secondary already feels like it's really high, and that it's going to be able to handle, a lot of stuff in college football. And that's what we watch. We're excited to see how they do at Penn State. But these first couple games, I'll just come back to you for just some closing thoughts, John. Is there anything that really concerns you about them? And what are you watching for? What's the number one thing you're looking for this Saturday?
It's just continue to see how rotations shake out, how things continue to work down towards this Penn State game coming up, because I think Oregon has clearly looked like one of the best teams in the country. I think they'll continue to look like one of the best teams in the country going against inferior competition over the next couple of weeks. So seeing how the offense continues to look, Dante Moore's comfort back there, can he open up some of those deep shots again and kind of make Penn State feel like they have to be ready for that when that time does come, and which can that then open up the running game and then the underneath passing game when you are at Penn State. So I don't know.
The Ducks say they take it one game at a time, but it really is all about that Penn State game right now. Honestly.
It really is right now.
Awesome. Well, we will be live following this Oregon Northwestern game, following some media responsibilities here on YouTube at Oregon Live at the Voice of College Football. Thanks so much, everybody. Thanks, John, for hanging with me here. It's an exciting time to be a Ducks fan. We appreciate you hanging with us, and we'll see you on Saturday.